Hello, everybody. Welcome to our 5-minute daily devotionals. This is a series of videos to highlight some thoughts from our Moravian Daily Text readings. And today's passage is taken from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 to 16. Ito yung pagpapatuloy na ating pag-uusap patungkol sa sulat ni Pablo sa mga Korinto. Now, if you could remember from yesterday, pinag-usapan natin na iniudyok niya, ini-admonish, ini-encourage ni Pablo na iwasan ng mga mananampalataya sa Korinto yung sexual immorality and how it is important for us to recognize that that same warning applies to us. We are to serve God and honor God with our bodies and not allow yung pag-uudyok ng laman, the urges of the flesh to draw us away from pleasing God. Sa ating reading ngayon, Paul goes on to talk about yung importansya ng marriage, yung pagiging isa sa matrimony. Now, again, the context dito is yung mga kapatiran sa Corinth ay nagko-commit ng sexual immorality. And Paul addresses one of the issues na maaaring nagdi-lead dito. Sabi niya sa verses 1 to 4, how marriage can serve as a deterrent to sexual immorality. And how people who are committed to one another in marriage can use that time together para mapigilan yung udyok na naman, yung sexual immorality. And Paul reminds yung mga kapatiran doon that one does not have authority over their body. It is to their spouse. Kung ikay asawang lalaki at asawang babae, ang iyong katawan ay authority ng iyong spouse. And it is important for us to recognize that it is not so much yung udyok na magkaroon ng sex together, but it is concession, yung pagpapasakop sa bawat isa. Now, Paul clarifies that there should be a time na to deprive one another. It is a time when prayer is necessary, when you are wanting to be drawing near to God. What Paul is saying to here is not to allow Satan to use the urges of the flesh to tempt us to commit sexual immorality because of our lack of self-control. Katulad na sinabi sa verse 5. And Paul is clear in saying this as well in verse 6. This is a concession, not a command. Okay? This is a concession, not a command. Ito'y galing kay Pablo, hindi galing sa Diyos. I say this in verse 6, it says, I wish that all were as myself. Kasi single si Pablo wala siyang asawa. But each one has his own gift from God, and of one kind and one of another. Ang gifting kasi ni Pablo is single blessedness, ika nga. He goes on to say in verse 8, to the unmarried and widows. Okay? Ito yung sa mga hindi pa kasal, sa mga single, at sa mga balo. I say it is good for them to remain single as I am. And here's the command. If they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. And this is how Paul is giving a lot of credit sa mga taong kasal because they are protecting themselves from falling to the temptation of sexual immorality. So sa mga kapatid na ating kasal, honor that marriage by serving one another, but allowing a time to devote to prayer. So hopefully this is clear. Now, this is a very sensitive and personal issue. I would encourage you to speak to somebody na pinagkakatiwalaan mo kung may issues kayo patungkol sa bagay nito. Myself and Corey will be willing if you want to talk about these matters yourself. Now, let's move on to verse 10. Kanina, nabagyan natin may mga concession na galing kay Pablo. Now, verse 10 clearly says, it is a command from God, this part. To the married, I give this charge, not I, but the Lord. So, ang Diyos mismo nagsabi. The wife should not separate from her husband, but if she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And the husband should not divorce his wife. Now, in our current modern lifestyle, this will be an issue. Again, If it's sensitive, it's something that you need to talk about, talk to somebody na napagkakatiwalaan nyo, or talk to myself or Court if you feel the need to do so. But this is clearly mentioned as a deterrent para sa mga tao na maaring malinlang ng kaaway. Now to the rest, in verse 12 to 16, Paul talks about paano kung ang asawa ko ay hindi mananampalataya. The key principle here is that if the spouse is an unbeliever, and they consent to live with you, ibig sabihin, hindi sila humiwalay, okay lang na manatili sa'yo, don't separate them, don't divorce them. Kasi posible na ang Diyos ay kumilos para sila ay maligtas. Ngayon, kung nag-decide silang umalis, let them be. Okay? Read that passage again, verses 12 to 16, to get more clarification. Now, the bottom line with all of this is that Paul is saying marriage is a gift from God, and that is something that God has put in place to prevent us from falling prey sa sexual immorality. Now, there are some instructions there. I encourage you to read that through. But be encouraged as well. God has a plan for you and wants your life to be a blessing, wants you to enjoy life together with somebody that you are committed to spend the rest of your life with. Let's do it in the way that God has planned so that we may enjoy what God has intended for us. God bless you as you live out and follow God's word.